All right, welcome to the after work video. I'm gonna try to focus my thoughts here and spend some time on this. I'm kind of, unfortunately, been a bit wrapped up in the news. It's just never stopping flood, and all it serves to do is make me angry. So, just kind of haven't learned yet to focus on things that really matter, like passing this exam. So unfortunately, I did not get around between videos to redoing the lab, but I can certainly do that now. This is just going to be the intro video. Oh, it's still going to be the same topic though. Oops, root authentication, plain text password. This actually looks like a good topology to have a Linux jump server. Well, actually not that great because it's got multiple ASs. So set chassis, network services, enhanced IP, top, commit and quit. Show pipe, oh, show configuration pipe display set. Perfect. Router 2. And router 4. Oops. Okay, so now I'm gonna need to enter in my keys. So unfortunately, I won't be able to share my screen during that. So I'm going to stop my share and then I will enter in my license keys. And I'll restate, if you want to get your own license key, you don't got to pay for it. You just need to call up and plead your case to Juniper. I think they're, for the most part, nice about it. But you can just say you want to practice using VMXs. And hopefully they will set you up. Oops. Oops, I did a Control C on that instead of a Control D. Perfect, okay, so I've got all my keys entered in. It's only 4 routers to set up, so Doesn't take too much time. I got all my license key information cleared off, so I can share my screen again. All right, so it's time to work on the next exercise. So we're going to start on rudder 1. And I've got it all nice and easy set up. I don't even need descriptions for this exercise because I've got it lined up 0, 2, 3, I think. Looks like I don't actually have it set up that way. I have it 1, 2, 3 instead of 0, 2, 3 on router 1. Yeah, and sure enough, it says 0, 2, 3. So I'm going to recable this up so that it's easier on me. So this is going to be 0 to 0. Yep, and now this is going to be 0 to 3, just like in the documentation. I'll take a look at that again. There you go. And one thing you'll notice about this is we've got the export statement applied to the neighbor, as was described in earlier documentation. You can apply an export or an import policy to the neighbor itself, to the entire group, or to the entire protocol. It just depends how specific you want. So if you want to apply a different export policy for each neighbor, then you apply it directly to the neighbor. But if you wanted to apply to all your neighbors, you certainly don't have to configure it for every neighbor. That would be a lot of configurations. So you can just apply it to the whole group. So that's one thing. If you're not comfortable on Junipers and you go into the exam and you're really not prepared, if you think, oh no, the neighbor statement is applied to, well, actually that is something that could be on the exam. Actually, is they say export these routes only to this peer. You go on the device and you see that the export is applied to the group but not to the neighbor. So what you'd have to do to solve that is delete it from the group and apply it to the neighbor. So that's definitely fair game to be on the exam. I'd actually be kind of surprised if something like that weren't on the exam, where a export policy were applied at the wrong hierarchy. And even now we can see set protocols BGP group. We've got two groups, int and ext. So if I applied it to the whole BGP protocol, it would be applied to both of those groups. So I think if I go on the exam and I see that it's applied to the whole of BGP, I know that's probably something that I might need to fix because that's way too general. So this is an import policy, so it's going to be applied to routes that are coming from BGP and to be put in the routing table. So this is the local preference. It's a well-known discretionary attribute. It has to be included in all of the implementations of BGP, but it does not have to be sent in an update message. But every router who runs BGP must have the ability to handle local preference. Okay, so we're going to be changing that local preference. And of course, we're going to be doing that from a route that we receive. So it's going to be an import policy because it's being taken from BGP and put into the routing table with a different local preference than what it was sent. And we know, since it's a well-known discretionary attribute, it doesn't even need to be sent with a local preference at all. And the other thing to remember about local preference is that the higher number wins. So local preference associated with the route, and then local preference. So let's take a look at more of the descriptions. So term, policy term, and then the name of the term. So one thing we've got to remember is this community. This is the name of, this is not the community itself. This is not what will be sent in the route. This is the name of the policy option that defines the community that will be sent in the route. So the policy option here, community, this is what we're putting here. It's not the actual community that will be advertised in the route. And as from the last video, we can remember that community attributes are optional attributes. They're unlike a local preference, which is a well-known attribute. There's two kinds of attributes, well-known and optional. But it's also a transitive attribute, which means that when it's sent to another router, it's going to send that community attribute. If it were non-transitive, it would send the route, but it wouldn't include that information in it. You would either need to add it to it, or in the case of a transitive route, as it is, if you didn't want it, you would have to create a policy to remove it, because if it's transitive, it will include it in its update messages out. If it's non-transitive, it will not. But this is definitely transitive. So let's see why that didn't take. Change local preference, set term find R3 routes from community from R3, set term find R3 routes, then local preference 50. Okay, so top edit policy options, send direct, edit term 1, set from protocol direct, set from route filter /30 exact, set then accept, options, community, oops, and it looks like you can't, you have to specify the community. Yeah, usually when you have a knob that requires a name, you can't go to the hierarchy of the knob without specifying the name. So we can certainly just configure it from here. So now here's the actual information that's going to be sent along with be included in the community path attribute in the BGP update packet. It's going to be the autonomous system 64511, and then the actual community identifier. And these are for routes coming from router 1. For router 3, so we're also going to tag routes coming from router 3 with this path attribute there. I don't know why my terminal just randomly pasted a bunch of stuff. That's another thing you've got to be really careful about in production. I actually, in the work I've done in production, I have disabled automatic paste, and I've actually made paste require a key combination, shift insert. And it's not a real easy key combination either, because I don't want things to just randomly paste into my terminal screen in production, as you just saw that they did here in the lab. Because when you're in production, the stakes are really high. Your services are, in some cases, they can be really, really critical to not have any sort of interruption at all. So if you cause that through carelessness or through just not being careful enough, well, carelessness, and that goes to the second kind of running theme of this channel: look before you leap. So before you commit something to, you're always doing your pre-checks and everything. This is kind of another thing. I think this is look before you leap. This is definitely a running theme that I bring up a lot, but it's not quite. It's definitely not concepts, not commands. It's definitely not quite look before you leap, because we're not really leaping. We're just configuring. But what can I call this? Because this is going to be a really running theme, and it's something I definitely want to have listed as one of the running themes. So I'll come up with something. Let me know in the comments if you like what I come up with, but I haven't come up with it yet. I guess I want to say something like check yourself before you wreck yourself or something, or that's not exactly it though. Like basically like eliminate chances to fail. I think that's right. Or lessen your failures. This is perfect. Yeah. Lessen your failures. I think that this is exactly it. So one thing that's really important is that when you fail at something, the something you fail at is something that is not so severe that you cannot get back on your feet and recover from your failure. So perfect example, tightrope walkers, if they're learning how to do it, they have a safety net. They fall into the net, they don't fall on their heads, they don't break their neck. So, as they get better, if you want to walk between over the Grand Canyon, yeah, it's not practical to put up a safety net. So if you're comfortable enough, and you're confident you're not going to fail, yeah, you don't need a safety net. But if you're practicing, and just in general, lessening your failures is really important, because you're going to fail, you're going to make mistakes. So you want the mistake to be not that, oops, I accidentally pasted in a bunch of stuff into this terminal screen because I did not disable the automatic paste. You want your mistakes to be more like, oops, I accidentally misspelled a command, so I got a caret on my screen. Oops, I put in the wrong syntax so my commit wouldn't take. Oops, let's see here. I did a show command on device A thinking it was device B, but I looked before I leapt and I noticed before I hit my commit. So these are all failures that are going to be good to have, because you learn more, you grow. But failures where you break your neck off, those are bad kinds of failures. So you want to lessen your failures. And a way you can do that is by disabling that automatic paste when you're in production, because pasting in random stuff into the screen and breaking a device, causing degradation of service, that's going to be a huge failure, a big failure. And you want to have as small failures as you can. It's not that you just never want to fail, because of course, if you never fail, you never succeed. A really great quote, one of my favorite quotes, is, the master has failed more times than the beginner has tried. But one thing I would like to add to that quote is that the master's failures are less than the beginner's failures as well. So this, I think, is pretty much the perfect way to say it. Let me know in the comments if it doesn't make sense, or if you want me to kind of clarify that in another video. But this is definitely a cornerstone concept of this channel, is to lessen your failures, because they're going to happen. They're just a part of learning. They're a part of having experience. They're a part of being an expert. But if you are walking a tightrope and you fall off the tightrope, that's a failure. It's the same kind of failure as if you fall off and there's no safety net. But what happens is less. You fall into a net, and you can even think it's more, because you fall into a net, you get up, you try again. That's great. If you don't have the net, you fall off, you break your net, you die. So you want to lessen your failures so you can get more out of your experiences. So I think that's perfect. That's the third cornerstone running theme of this channel. So concepts, not commands, that's probably the biggest one. Look before you leap. It kind of falls in line with lessen your failures. It's kind of the same thing, but I think it warrants its own thing, because it's kind of in a different context. It's like, before you make a change, you need to look and verify your change and double check and make sure you're doing what you're doing, even check in with a coworker or something like that. But lessen your failures, that's a little bit different, because you don't want to fall off. You don't want to learn how to ride a bike down a giant hill, fall off your bike and die. You want to learn how to ride a bike on a flat surface, so if you fall off, you can get back up and go again. You want to lessen your failures so you can learn from them and grow, instead of breaking your neck and dying and not being able to continue on. It's a huge, huge thing. A lot of people kind of have an unhealthy attitude towards failure, and kind of a lot of what I've heard is just failure is okay. And I think that's a better attitude than just failure is not okay and it's something to be really ashamed of. But it's really missing a big picture of what it means to fail. Because if you fail and you fail hard, you might not recover from your failure. So it is really important to lessen your failures and make sure that when you fail, you can come back and you can recover. So there are lots of things you can do to do that. You can disable automatic paste. You can create scripts that double check your work. You can, there's a clipboard viewer you can get that shows you what's in your clipboard the whole time before you paste it. MobaTerm has it by default. Whenever you hit paste, it'll show you what's in your clipboard and say, are you sure you want to paste? You can check in with your coworkers. You say, hey, I'm gonna apply this. Does this look right? There's lots and lots and lots of ways you can lessen your failures. All right. But I'm just going to keep it the way it is because it's just the lab. So show pipe compare. Commit and quit. Oops, and did I forget? Oh, okay, let's see here. So policy options, policy send direct referenced, but not defined. So I never defined the send direct policy. It looks like this is where I would have defined it, so I'm not sure what happened there. I think I just skipped that. So I'm going to go back and not skip it. So this RUV filter looks very familiar. Oh, and exact, of course. Yeah, lessen your failures is definitely probably the best way I can think of to say that. Of course, it's a bit more complicated than that. It doesn't quite give you the whole story. Just lessen your failures. There's more to it than that. But I think it's pretty accurate because it's not about avoiding your failures or not having any failures. It's about making sure that you can recover from them and keep going. And the only time you can prepare for that is before you've made it. After you've made it, it's far too late. Yeah, another thing about failure, because I've learned a lot about that. This network engineering isn't my first choice of career. There's, as I said, there's a lot of really unhealthy kind of almost dangerous attitudes towards it. But really, if you can, try to learn through success, you're going to learn better than if you learn through failure. And that's, of course, not to say that failure is something you need to be ashamed of. Failure is something that is a bad thing and reflects badly upon you. It's, you know, it can be all luck. It can be just you're beyond your means of skill or whatever. You know, it's not necessarily a reflection of your character that you failed. But if you're going to learn something and your kind of strategy for learning is, I'm just going to make a bunch of mistakes, you might want to rethink that strategy and instead take the attitude of, I'm going to start at or a little bit above my means of skill and then gradually work up more and practice things that I can do and am comfortable with doing, instead of things that I can't do and continually fail at. That, I think, is a better learning strategy. So many calls. Luckily, this video is mostly just typing out. It's not like it's a really in-depth video. So done with router 2. So let's move on to router 3 and get through router 4, and then the next. And then I think that'll be the end of this video. The next video will be verification. Oh, and you can see here, they have an 8 instead of a 0. You can't use an 8 unless you have VLAN tagging, something like that. Not worth a downvote. It's, yeah, it might trip up the beginner, but again, if you're working on BGP policies that target optional transitive path attributes, they're probably not going to be thrown off too badly by there being a unit 8 when you know it's a unit 0. One thing I am kind of curious about, though, is if some of these typos are actually in their help menu that's baked into their OS. I really haven't looked at it closely enough to know. And that is kind of a goal I would like to do more of, is get used to using that so I can take advantage of it during the test, instead of relying on Google searches that won't be there when I take the test. So here's that good old-fashioned local address. If we didn't include that, it would, in the update, use whatever is selected through its rules. So the egress interface would be used for the next hop instead of the address we specify. We could also set up a next hop self policy, but that local address takes care of that. And here we can see again, the export policy is applied directly to the interface, or sorry, to the neighbor. Now it's time to configure the external connection, external BGP group. Preference, again, is a well-known discretionary attribute. At least they're consistent about it. That's kind of nice. But yeah, you can't use any encapsulation other than 0 unless you have VLAN tagging or a different kind of encapsulation. All right, so set from community from R3. Set then local preference 200. So this is a pretty high number, so it's likely that it will be selected. I believe the default is 150. Oops. Perfect. So one last router, and then I'll end the video there. And the next video will be the verification and Wireshark captures. Oops. So that's a BGP group going to R1. So there's also going to be a BGP group going to R3. They're going to be very similar. Oops. So you can see we have two different terms here. One term is going to apply the community to the first 4 routes, and the second term is going to apply a different community from the next 4 routes. Oops. Perfect. Okay, so here's these special routes with the reject keyword. So if anyone tries to use these routes, we'll be sending an ICMP reply that says that the route is unreachable. One thing that is suspiciously absent is that we don't have a install, so it's not going to be a usable route in the routing table. That's kind of interesting because if we're sending these, it won't be in the forwarding table. So I wonder if they'll actually be sent or if this is going to work, but we'll find out in the next video in the verification steps. Perfect. So everything, oh, so we got an error here. So we've got the policy community is defined in term 2. Oh, sorry, it's referenced, but it's not defined. So let's say show pipe display set pipe match from R3. So there it is referenced, of course, but do we have it defined? Let's see. So in the documentation, we were told to define it right here. So let's take a look at what happened there. Aha, so this is what happened. I accidentally used the name for the ones that are meant to go to R1 for R3. So nice and easy fix. Those are my favorite kinds of errors. It's kind of a good mix of kind of what this channel is all about, these two concepts, look before you leap. Thankfully, this is what I love about Juniper's. It's denied by the commit. If this were a Cisco, everything goes right in the running config, and that's especially important. But Juniper's, it'll do that for you. It'll look before you leap for you. And then, of course, this second concept, lessen your failures. You know, I failed to configure it properly, but all that means is that I literally just need to delete what was there and then go in and change this 1 to a 3. I mean, it's a completely inconsequential failure. It just cost me like 10 seconds to fix. So it's a very small failure. Now, if I were to have configured all the IPs wrong, configured the communities wrong, stuff like that, those are going to be a lot bigger failures. So those are things I'm definitely going to want to be even more careful to look before I leap on those. Find some system of double checking, just being very careful that I'm entering that in correctly so that I lessen my failures and make mistakes that I can recover from. All right, so everything committed just fine. Let's read the step-by-step if anything jumps out. So here's something. Configure the policy send direct. The policy is referenced in the IBGP connection to device R2 and enables device R2 to have external reachability. An alternative is to configure a next hop self policy on R1 and device R3. So an alternative to having these direct routes sent. So it looks like we're also sending an additional, well, let's look at router 1. Let's look a little bit more closely at this. Set pipe no more. So we've got, or let's look at the show configuration interfaces, pipe display set relative, and then show configuration policy options, policy statements, send direct, pipe display set relative. Put those side by side, and now we can see, oh, I'm actually even missing a part of this. I don't have the set from protocol direct in there. So I wonder why I missed that. Was it not? Let's see here, send direct. Yeah, so I just straight up missed it. So, well, that's kind of too bad because that would have been something I would have had to troubleshoot to figure out, and that would have actually been a really interesting thing to resolve. You know what, I'm gonna leave that off and hopefully I forget about it by the time I come back, and I will have to do some real troubleshooting to figure out that problem. So, but that is an alternative to next hop self. So configure the policy that changes the local preference for routes with specified community tags. That happens here. There's more information about the step-by-step. Configure the policy send static. This policy is referenced in the eBGP connections to device R1 and device R3. The policy attaches the 64511:1 from R1 community to some routes and the 64511:3 from R3 community to other routes. All right, so this is just to verify the results. So here's going to be the commands in the next video where we verify the work, and hopefully I'll forget that I forgot to advertise the direct routes on router 1, and we can see what difference that makes and resolve it in the next video. So good stuff to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.